In 1875, in a remote northern settlement called Briar Hollow, hidden among endless pine forest and black marshland, something happened that people would only speak about in whispers. The account was discovered decades later in the attic of an abandoned frontier farmhouse. Brittle, yellowed pages covered in trembling handwriting. The kind of writing that feels less like memory and more like a warning. At the very edge of Blackwater Lake lived an old woman named Martha Crowell. Her cabin leaned with age, its grey timber walls nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding woods. Moss clung to the corners. The windows reflected nothing. The house did not seem built. It seemed grown, as if a tree had once decided to watch. People had whispered about Martha for years. They said she knew things no one was meant to know, that she spoke to shadows, that she could call back those who had already crossed beyond this world. At first, the townsfolk dismissed it as superstition, the usual stories that gather around a woman who lives too long and too far from everyone else. But then the impossible began, and fear crept through Briar Hollow like cold mist rolling in from Blackwater Lake. The first to return was Elias Turner. He had drowned in the lake 3 weeks earlier. They had dragged the shoreline for days, but the water kept what it took. Yet one morning, he was found lying on the bank, soaked through, strands of dark lakeweed tangled in his hair, alive. He did not speak. He did not blink. He stared past the trees, fixed on something no one else could see. From time to time, a low, wet sound rose from his throat. Not quite a breath, not quite a word. Something closer to water moving in a closed space. His mother collapsed when she saw him. His father stood frozen on the porch, whispering, "That's not my boy." 3 days later, Elias vanished. They had laid him down to sleep that night. By morning, the bed was empty. Only damp footprints led across the wooden floor, out the door, and back toward Blackwater Lake. After Elias, Briar Hollow grew quieter. People avoided looking toward Blackwater Lake. They avoided speaking about what had happened. But a month later, something occurred that could no longer be dismissed as grief or coincidence. Old Abigail Turner returned. She had died of fever. She had been buried on a low rise beyond the small frontier chapel. Everyone believed the earth had taken what belonged to it. Yet one evening, the door of her cabin opened softly, and Abigail stepped inside. She walked to the iron stove, lowered herself onto the bench, and simply waited. The children saw her first. Their screams brought the neighbors running. Abigail's face was grey, as though dusted with ash. Her eyes were cloudy, filmed over like ice forming on still water. Her breathing came in shallow, broken pulls, as if she were trying to remember the rhythm of being alive. She did not eat. She did not drink. From time to time, she whispered the same words. Cold. So cold. At night, dampness crept through the cabin. Moisture gathered on the floorboards, though no rain had fallen. The air carried the smell of algae and deep water. On the third night, the door opened by itself. Those who had kept watch heard bare feet crossing the wooden porch, slow, deliberate steps. Then came a soft splash from the direction of Blackwater Lake. By morning, Abigail was gone. Only a faint trail of wet footprints stretched down the road toward the lake and vanished at the shoreline. After that, fear became visible in Briar Hollow. People no longer whispered. They exchanged long, silent looks. Blackwater Lake was no longer just a body of water. It had become a presence. And so they went to Martha Crowell with questions. They went to Martha Crowell at dusk. There were 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women. They did not shout. They did not wave their arms. Fear reaches a point where it becomes heavy, dense, like wet clothes clinging to the skin. Martha met them on the porch of her cabin. She stood straighter than anyone expected. A toothless smile stretched across her mouth, but there was something alive in her eyes, too alive for a woman her age. "You know why we're here?" one of the men said. "I do," Martha answered calmly. "You're afraid." A breeze drifted in from Blackwater Lake, stirring the loose strands of her silver hair. From inside the cabin came the faint scent of damp wood, as though the floorboards themselves were drinking water. "Are you the one bringing them back?" one of the women asked, clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Martha tilted her head slightly, as if listening, not to them, but to something standing just beyond them. "I only helped them finish what was left undone," she said softly. "They cannot leave until they speak what they never spoke in life." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. In her eyes, the dark surface of Blackwater Lake seemed to flicker. "You're playing with fire," someone whispered. Martha let out a quiet laugh. "Fire? No, not fire. It's water. It's calling me." Since then, the nights in Briar Hollow had grown longer and heavier. Every evening, the mist from Blackwater Lake would rise, thickening the air until it felt dense and wet. Along the narrow paths, faint footsteps could be heard, the creak of floorboards, even when no one had passed by. Not everyone returned, but those who did left behind an icy dread that clung to the skin and seeped into the bones, impossible to shake, even when hiding inside. The first to return was Abigail. She had died a month ago from a fever, but this time she sat by the fireplace, staring into a fire that was not there, whispering, "Cold, so cold." The children froze in terror. The adults clutched their crosses, but no one could approach. On the 3rd night, she left again. The door opened on its own, and the villagers heard bare footsteps across the porch, followed by the soft splash of water from the lake. Then the drowned, the hanged, and the sick began to return. Each came silently, their eyes empty, their movements slow but deliberate. No words, no pleas. After a few days, they vanished as suddenly as they appeared, leaving only dampness, the smell of mud, and the chilling presence of death. Martha began to change. Her skin smoothed, her hair darkened, her movements became unnaturally precise, as if she had absorbed the strength of all those who returned. She no longer appeared old or frail. Every gesture carried an inhuman grace. Villagers saw her pass, and her shadow stretched long and ominous across the ground, as though the night itself followed her. One night, a scream tore through the village, sharp, piercing, enough to choke even the bravest men. Running outside, the villagers saw smoke pouring from Martha's cabin, although no fire burned. When they rushed inside, she was gone. Only her clothes lay on the floor, and on the wall, scrawled in blood, were the words, "She has gone into the water. She waits." The next morning, the villagers gathered by Blackwater Lake. The water was unnaturally still, mirror-like, reflecting the sky, but strangely wrong. In the center, a dark silhouette emerged. It was Martha. She stood waist-deep, staring at the shore, smiling. One of the men shouted, "Martha, come out, enough." Slowly, she turned her head, and they saw her eyes had become black, as deep as the lake itself. Her voice did not come from her throat, but from the very depths of the water. "I am not Martha. I am what lives below. I have come for you." She stepped forward, and the lake swallowed her. In that moment, the water churned, waves rose, and 1,000 whispering voices spoke in an unknown language from the depths. The villagers scattered, and the next morning, the lake looked alien, unrecognizable. Since then, the villagers lived in constant fear. Every night, someone would disappear. The elders said they saw shadows on the water, heard whispers through the mist, and a faint, crunching sound of footsteps. No one could explain who or what was taking the people, but everyone knew. Do not approach the lake at night. Some brave souls tried to guard their homes. Arrows, firecrackers, prayers, all were in vain. Every night, the figure would rise from the water. Sometimes it seemed to call names. Those who heard its voice vanished without a trace. Later, they were found in the lake, their eyes empty, and a strange, icy smile frozen on their lips. At times, it seemed that Martha, or whatever she had become, controlled the entire lake and the surrounding forest. The water whispered her name, the trees creaked like old bones. Anyone who dared look into the lake saw the sky reflected, but inverted, and beneath the surface, dark silhouettes moved, ready to rise. Years passed. The village emptied. People stopped going out at night. The legend of Blackwater Lake became a terror for generations. Even in daylight, the air remained heavy, as if the mist never left. And sometimes, on moonless nights, a whisper drifts along the shore. I wait, and a faint, cold smile appears in the water, as if someone is looking straight into your soul. The manuscript ends with a warning. Do not go to Blackwater Lake. She is still there, and she waits. We lived our lives quietly, without trouble. Everyone had their own work, their own small piece of land. Whatever a person had, that's what they shared. Sophia had plenty of milk from her cows and goats. She traded it with Dimitri for cabbage and carrots. Frank was the apple master of the town. 11 different varieties grew in his orchard, enough to feed everyone. Some people liked sour apples, others sweet ones, some firm, some soft. And everyone in the area knew that if you wanted apples, you went to Frank. Linda always had eggs. She kept a large flock of laying hens. We knew the mushroom pickers. We knew the fishermen. Nobody ever asked for money. Everything was trade, or simply given as a friendly gift. The brothers Samuel and Ben kept bees. Their honey was the best you could find anywhere around. Me, I'm a simple man. No education, no scientific degrees. But I can tell you something for certain. A town like ours, it's a living organism. Every family brings something into it. If nobody works, the organism dies. But when everyone does their part, everything runs smoothly. And for many years, everything was just fine. Until that girl started coming to our town. People around here called her the girl in green. If you ever see her, run. Lock your door as fast as you can. Pour salt across the entrance so she can't step over it. Don't look out the windows and turn off the lights. Stay quiet, stay still. If you do everything right, she won't touch you. She'll just pass by. Too bad we only figured that out after half the town had already been destroyed by that creature. It was the beginning of a real disaster for our community. The first time the girl in green appeared, she went to see Ivan, the blacksmith. people saw them talking outside in the street, and then they went into his house together. At first, no one thought much about it. Maybe she was a relative, maybe an old acquaintance. But just a couple minutes later, she ran out of the house, wiping her lips, and hurried away. The men nearby rushed into Ivan's house, and when they saw him, he looked completely dried out, like a mummy. That was when everything truly began. All kinds of rumors started spreading, but I didn't pay much attention to them. I knew one thing. If I ever saw her, I'd lock my door, grab the fireplace poker or a pitchfork, and if she tried to come near me, she'd regret it. Some of the villagers doubted that a young girl could do something like that. Some blamed Ivan's death on illness. Others whispered different kinds of gossip. But I was certain it was her. And soon enough, she appeared again. The same thing happened, this time to the brothers Samuel and Ben. I have no idea how she managed to deal with two grown men at once, but someone in our town must have angered a very wicked spirit, because I don't believe she's human. No, she's something else. People said her hair was green, her skin pale, her dress green as well, even her eyes, green, and on her finger she wore a ring with a large green stone. Some folks believed that stone held all her power. Take the ring away, and she'd turn into nothing more than a swamp toad or a venomous snake. When she returned to the town again, many people were terrified. Most hid inside their houses, but 4 men decided to do something different. They gathered together and planned to steal the ring. They jumped out of an ambush, but she threw them aside like rag dolls and drained them one by one. The one I feel worst about is George. He was a good man, skilled with his hands, and he knew the forest better than anyone. Always came back with baskets full of mushrooms. Me, you could drag me through the woods 100 times, and I still wouldn't find my way home. Fishing suits me much better. For some reason, that girl hunted only men. I once had a woman I cared about in a nearby town. We had a bit of a romance, about 40 years ago, but that doesn't matter. One day she came to visit me and told me something strange. In her town, almost all the men had disappeared. Only 2 were left, and they managed to drive the creature away using salt. That was when I realized what I had to do, and I found out just in time. The very next night, the girl in green came for me. I looked out the window and saw her walking toward my house. She opened the gate, crossed the yard, and she was smiling. I did everything exactly the way I'd been told. I poured salt across the doorway, locked the door, turned off the lights, just in case. I grabbed the fireplace poker, and I waited. She knocked on the door, called my name, tapped her fingers softly against the window. She asked for water, asked for food, but I didn't fall for it. She could go back wherever she came from. She returned 3 nights in a row. After that, I warned everyone in the town what to do if the girl in green ever appeared again. And eventually, she left. No one has seen her since. Where did she come from? Who knows? Some say she was the daughter of a forest spirit or a water demon, collecting souls for her father. Others believe she was some kind of witch, stealing youth from the men she killed. Maybe the truth is something else entirely. I can't say, but the damage she caused our town was enormous. I doubt the place will ever fully recover, although, who knows? Maybe we'll manage to survive after all. Wait a second. Someone's knocking at the door, probably the neighbor. He said he might stop by tonight. I'm back. There are smells that never leave your memory, ever. For some people, it's the scent of fresh bread from childhood. For others, the perfume of first love. For me, it's the thick, sickly sweet smell of blood, mixed with harsh chlorine, and the cold, metallic freshness of industrial freezers. I worked at a meat processing plant for almost 5 years. It's not the kind of job you're proud of. It's the kind of job that feeds you. Our plant was an old concrete and brick monster on the outskirts of a small Midwestern town. A place where life turns into raw material under the constant hum of conveyor belts and the hiss of steam. Every day was the same. The bellowing of cattle in the pens, the dull odor of the pneumatic stunner, the clatter of hooks, long rows of carcasses drifting slowly into the cold belly of the cutting floor. You get used to it. People get used to anything. After a while, you stop seeing animals. You see meat, pounds, tons, work. The crew matched the place. Simple men, strong, quiet. Life had beaten them down, but not broken them. Among all of them, 2 stood out to me. The first was old Nick, or just Nick, as everyone called him. Nearly 60, dry as a stick, his face carved with deep wrinkles like a map of forgotten roads. He'd worked here since before the plant was privatized and seemed to know everything about it and the land around it. He was the kind of old man who remembered rural superstitions, believed in the evil eye, and knew exactly why you never whistled indoors. We laughed at him, but quietly we listened. There was something heavy and ancient in his words. The second was Mike, my age, my shift partner, the complete opposite of Nick. Loud, cocky, cynical to the bone. Nothing was sacred to him. He cracked jokes over fresh carcasses, whistled upbeat tunes during slaughter. He believed in neither God nor the devil. Only in his paycheck and a few drinks after work at the local dive bar. To be fair, he was good at his job. His hand was steady. His soul, though, was deaf. That's how we lived, day after day. Routines soaked into skin and fingernails until that shipment arrived. Normally, livestock came from large commercial farms. Healthy, well-fed cattle, all the same. But that time, an old rattling truck pulled in with a few animals from some forgotten backwater called Crooked Meadows. They were brought by a silent, grim old man who looked like he'd stepped out of the woods. He signed the paperwork in a hurry, took the money, and drove off without even looking back at the cattle. Ezra's stock, Nick muttered, watching the truck leave. Bad place, bad owner. Folks say he messed with things he shouldn't have. Oh, come on, Nick, Mike scoffed. Everyone who lives past the county line is a devil worshipper to you, just an old man being weird. But the cows were strange, thin, their coats dull and matted, and their eyes, human eyes, smart, sad, full of something that wasn't animal at all. They didn't moo, they didn't panic. They just stood there watching. One of them stood out more than the rest, old, one horn broken, a large white blotch on its forehead like a spilled stain. It wasn't looking at us, it was looking through us. We'll process that one last, the foreman said. Something's off, let it sit. I couldn't get that cow out of my head for the rest of the shift. I kept catching myself looking for it, even though I knew exactly where it was. In the far corner of the pen, slightly apart from the others. It didn't lie down, didn't chew, didn't move. It just stood there, watching. When it was finally time for slaughter, the plant felt unusually quiet. Even the familiar hum of machinery seemed muted, as if the walls themselves were swallowing the sound. Mike was already in position, like always. He rolled a cigarette between his fingers, waiting for the signal, softly whistling under his breath. "Well," he said, "last one for today. Then we're out of here." Nick stood a little farther back. He wasn't smiling. He hadn't said much all day, just watched. And every now and then, he crossed himself, thinking no one noticed. When the cow was brought closer, I felt a strange chill. Not from the freezers, from somewhere deeper. It walked calmly, without resistance. Its hooves echoed dully against the concrete floor, each step hitting me right in the chest for reasons I couldn't explain. "I don't like this," Nick muttered. "I really don't like this." "Relax," Mike waved him off. "A cow's a cow. We'll make it quick." He raised the pneumatic stunner and aimed. At that moment, the cow turned its head, slowly, too deliberately, and looked straight at Mike. I swear there was recognition in its eyes. The dull odor sounded. The body jerked, then went limp. Everything happened like it always did. Too fast to think. We started processing. Blood ran through the channels. Steam rose toward the ceiling. Machines came back to life as if nothing unusual had happened. But the smell was different, thicker, heavier. It clung to the throat and made my stomach turn. Mike noticed it first. "Do you smell that?" He frowned. "Did they overdo the bleach or something?" Nick stepped closer, stared at the carcass, then recoiled sharply. "That's not right," he whispered. "It shouldn't smell like that." We kept working, but something was clearly wrong. Mike's knife suddenly slipped, like the flesh had become too soft, too yielding. He cursed, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, then froze. "Hey," he said quietly, "do you hear that?" I listened. At first nothing. And then, somewhere deep inside the carcass, beneath layers of meat and bone, there was a faint, wet sound, almost like a breath. Mike slowly pushed his hand inside the carcass, feeling for the organs. I saw his shoulders tense up. He usually did this on autopilot, barely looking, but now he froze. "That's weird," he muttered. "Something's wrong." "What is it?" I called out. He didn't answer right away. His face tightened, brows drawing together. He reached in again, deeper, rougher. "There's no heart," he said finally. "Nothing. There's something else in here." Nick stepped closer, but didn't dare look. His face had gone pale. "Don't touch it," he said quietly. "You shouldn't." "What are you talking about?" Mike let out a nervous laugh. "Probably a tumor, or some kind of clot." He grabbed hold and pulled. What came out dropped into the silence of the plant like a punch to the nerves. It was a fist, a human one, large, male, rough skin, thick veins bulging under the surface. The fingers were clenched so tightly the knuckles had turned white. It was warm, alive. The fist was pulsing, slowly, steadily, opening and closing, as if an invisible heart was beating inside it. In the cold air, a faint mist rose from its surface. Mike stared at it without blinking. The color drained from his face. His fingers loosened on their own, and the fist hit the concrete with a wet, heavy slap. It didn't stop moving. It lay in a pool of blood, living its own grotesque life, clenching, unclenching, like it was trying to grab something. Nick was the first to snap out of it. He crossed himself sharply. "A ward," he whispered. "Dear God, we broke it." "Are you out of your mind?" Mike shouted. This is some kind of mutation." That was when the plant manager ran into the room. Frank and I drove to Crooked Meadows the next day. He said we couldn't wait anymore. If we wanted answers, we had to go back to where it all started. The drive took hours. The farther we went, the worse the road became. Asphalt turned to cracked concrete, then to packed dirt. The forest thickened, leaning in toward the road like it was closing around us. Cell service disappeared completely. Crooked Meadows was almost dead. Sagging houses, broken windows, yards swallowed by weeds. No people, no dogs, not even birds, just wind pushing dry grass across empty ground. Ezekiel Crow's house stood apart, right at the edge of the woods. Old, sunken into the earth, darkened by age. The windows were boarded shut. The porch leaned dangerously to one side. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled of rot and dampness. The room was nearly empty. A table, a stool, a stove. On the table lay a book, old, thick, bound in cracked leather that looked disturbingly like dried skin. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't a prayer book. It was something else. Frank opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, covered in uneven, archaic handwriting. Strange symbols, diagrams, drawings, hands, fists, circles, shapes that made my head ache just looking at them. "This isn't witchcraft," he said quietly. "It's a watcher's record." He read slowly, sounding out the old language. And with every line, the cold inside me deepened. Ezekiel wasn't a healer. He was a keeper. One of many passed down through generations, tasked with imprisoning a thing called the handless hunger. A being with no body of its own. It could enter a person and devour them from the inside, leaving nothing but an empty shell. There was only one way to contain it. Once a generation, the keeper created a charm. He took the heart of a living creature and through a ritual that demanded sacrifice, turned it into a living prison. That vessel was placed inside an animal host. As long as the host lived, as long as the charm kept beating, the hunger remained trapped. All it could do was knock from inside, clench and unclench its single fist. "We set it free," I whispered. Frank nodded. "And now it's looking for a new home. And the first ones it will come for are us. We smell like its old cage." That's when the door creaked. We turned. Mike was standing in the doorway. That evening, when I got home, I knew something was wrong. The apartment looked the same as always, quiet, clean, but the slaughterhouse hadn't stayed behind. It clung to me like a smell that wouldn't wash off. The sound came first, soft, steady, rhythmic, like a massive heart beating somewhere far away. I stopped in the hallway and listened. The sound wasn't coming from one place. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the floor, in the air. I checked the clock, then the radiators, then the refrigerator. Everything was normal, but the sound didn't stop. It shifted inward, settling deep inside my head. Then came the smell, the same one, thick, sickly sweet blood mixed with bleach. I was sitting in my kitchen, in my own apartment, but it felt like I was back on the processing floor, surrounded by hooks and cold steel. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the sound seemed to grow louder. The next day, Mike didn't show up for work. He called around noon. His voice sounded wrong, dull, muffled, like he was speaking through cotton. "I'm not good," he said. "My arm, my right arm, it hurts bad. I called a doctor." I tried to ask more, but he ended the call abruptly. Frank came in, looking exhausted and grim. He barely spoke all shift. In the smoking area, he pulled me aside and lowered his voice, like he was afraid someone might hear us. "The old man's dead," he said. "The one who owned that cow. Been dead for over a week. Neighbors found him. The livestock wandered off. That's how it ended up with us." "So what?" I asked. even though my stomach was already tightening. Frank was quiet for a long moment, then he exhaled heavily. That charm lost its keeper. He held it, fed it with his own strength, and now there's no one left. We didn't just kill a cow, we broke a prison. He looked straight into my eyes, and whatever was locked inside is free now, and is hungry. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the middle of a burned out field. The ground was black and cracked, and everywhere human hands were sticking out of the earth, clenched into fists, hundreds of them, thousands. They began to open, slowly, so slowly. I knew that when they fully opened, something terrible would happen. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Mike's wife. She was crying, barely able to speak. Mike was in the hospital. He woke up in the middle of the night screaming from pain in his right arm. It had swollen, turned dark, hard as stone. The doctors didn't understand it. They said it looked like some kind of rapidly spreading gangrene. I set the phone down and realized this was only the beginning. Frank and I drove to Crooked Meadows the next day. He said we couldn't wait anymore. If we wanted answers, we had to go back to where it all started. The drive took hours. The farther we went, the worse the road became. Asphalt turned to cracked concrete, then to packed dirt. The forest thickened, leaning in toward the road like it was closing around us. Cell service disappeared completely. Crooked Meadows was almost dead. Sagging houses, broken windows, yards swallowed by weeds. No people, no dogs, not even birds. Just wind pushing dry grass across empty ground. Ezekiel Crow's house stood apart, right at the edge of the woods. Old, sunken into the earth, darkened by age. The windows were boarded shut. The porch leaned dangerously to one side. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled of rot and dampness. The room was nearly empty. A table, a stool, a stove. On the table lay a book, old, thick, bound in cracked leather that looked disturbingly like dried skin. It wasn't a journal. It wasn't a prayer book. It was something else. Frank opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, covered in uneven, archaic handwriting. Strange symbols, diagrams, drawings, hands, fists, circles, shapes that made my head ache just looking at them. "This isn't witchcraft," he said quietly. "It's a watcher's record." He read slowly, sounding out the old language. And with every line, the cold inside me deepened. Ezekiel wasn't a healer. He was a keeper. One of many passed down through generations, tasked with imprisoning a thing called the handless hunger. A being with no body of its own. It could enter a person and devour them from the inside, leaving nothing but an empty shell. There was only one way to contain it. Once a generation, the keeper created a charm. He took the heart of a living creature and through a ritual that demanded sacrifice, turned it into a living prison. That vessel was placed inside an animal host. As long as the host lived, as long as the charm kept beating, the hunger remained trapped. All it could do was knock from inside, clench and unclench its single fist. "We set it free," I whispered. Frank nodded. "And now it's looking for a new home. And the first ones it will come for are us. We smell like its old cage." That's when the door creaked. We turned. Mike was standing in the doorway. Mike stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing a hospital gown smeared with dirt and blood. His eyes were wide open, staring straight through us. Not at us, as if we weren't even there. His right hand. It took me a second to understand what was wrong, and then it hit me. It was bigger, much bigger, swollen, blackened. The skin stretched tight. A massive fist that seemed to have a will of its own. It twitched, clenched, relaxed, like something inside it was beating. "It's calling me," Mike rasped. "It's hungry." He took a step forward, and his body convulsed. I heard a dry, subtle crack. His ribcage bowed outward, as if something heavy and alien was pushing from the inside. He groaned, but the sound was no longer fully human. "It's inside me," he said. "There's no room." Frank went pale, but he didn't back away. He flipped through the book quickly, found a page, and pressed his finger to it. "Here," he whispered. "It can be fooled, given another cage, just for a little while." He grabbed the heavy cast iron candlestick from the table and stepped toward Mike. "Run, Aaron," he said loudly now, without turning around. "Run and don't look back," while it's focused on me. "Frank, run," I ran. Behind me came a sound no human throat should make. The house shook. I heard heavy impacts, splintering wood, screams where I could no longer tell Mike's voice from something else entirely. Then there was a sharp, wet sound, and then silence. I didn't look back. I ran out of the village without knowing where the road was. The forest clawed at my face, branches tore my clothes, but I felt nothing. I kept running until I collapsed, gasping for air and terror. I don't know what Frank did. I don't know if the ritual worked. I only know one thing. He bought me time. I don't know what exactly happened in that house. I never went back, and I never will. I left that same day, grabbed a backpack, my documents, a little cash, and got on the first bus I saw. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain anything. I just disappeared, changed cities, then another one, then my name. I tried to dissolve into the crowd, to become ordinary. Years passed. Now I live in a big city, surrounded by thousands of faces and other people's lives. I work in an office that smells only of coffee and paper. I learned how to smile, how to talk about the weather, how to pretend I'm normal. Sometimes I almost believe it myself, but it never left. Sometimes I wake up at night because of a sound, quiet, rhythmic, thump, 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 like a massive heart beating somewhere very close. I lie there, holding my breath, trying to understand whether I hear it with my ears or inside my own head. Sometimes the smell comes back. Blood, bleach, cold metal, and it feels like the walls of my apartment are about to pull apart and drop me back into that slaughterhouse. I look at my hands for a long time, carefully, checking if my fingers are trembling, if the skin feels too tight, if something beneath it is pulsing. And sometimes it feels like it isn't skin at all, just clothing, a temporary shell, something that can be taken off. Frank only bought me time, a little time, not enough. It used to be called the handless hunger, but now it has hands, and it remembers. It knows who set it free. It knows my scent. And one day, when this shell becomes too tight, it will knock again. Thump,